Good afternoon and thank you for coming. My name is Sherry Autrey and it's wonderful to be here with you today regarding a subject that affects many communities and families' ability to be healthy. At this time, I'm a PhD student studying public health. Public health protects and keeps individuals safe and healthy every day. We are lucky enough to live in a country which has many available services, but some are not accessible to all. This is an example of social determinant. Individuals and communities suffer from inequity in that they cannot afford to purchase or access the viable foods to be healthy. Although this presentation deals with the changing North American Indian farmers from the Pima and O'Odham tribes, the concerns affect every corner of the world. Once a complete Indian nation, the introduction of technology and progress has divided the community. According to the Indian Health Services, there is an assessed 3.3 million Native American Indians and Alaska Natives in the United States. Many of these still reside on reservations. The purpose of this scholarly practitioner project is to introduce the social determinants of health which contribute to the overwhelming inequity of health and disease, such as diabetes too. This journal serves as an introduction into the contributions of the project known as Producing a New Generation of Native American Farmers. Introduction into the social determinants of the North American natives is relevant in the structural plan for change. For the purpose of this venture, the history and change of the Tohono O'odham and Pima Indians of the Hia River Valley will serve as the researched population. The United States is troubled by social inequities in providing for the lower income and Native people. In an attempt to equalize social disparities between the populations, it is necessary to provide for equal, healthy living experiences. This can be achieved by the recognition of Native communities suffering from the increasing prevalence of obesity, diabetes, and kidney disease. Traditional foods and physical activities work together in combination for a healthier lifestyle. Among people with fewer financial attributes, there tends to be a lack of education and health. Initially, these disparities are not only devastating to rural and Native populations, but the safety of the children. Wesner proposes the Hia River tribe could return to a healthy society if the opportunity for water and its irrigation was available. Avoidable differences in health outcomes between social groups function to disadvantage of people in lower income and indigenous people. The complete impact of diabetes is unknown because of pre-existing conditions and various degrees of illness, along with the measurements of the quality of life, disability, depression, and lack of medical care. For years we have been taught that our genes determine our level of health. In other words, if our parents are short, we'll be short. If our parents are smart, we'll be smart. If our parents develop heart disease, we will develop heart disease. These assumptions hold some truth, but are generally a disempowering, life-threatening belief. It is true that genes play a role in pretty much every disease. However, the environment we are exposed to, both outside our bodies and at a cellular level, is much more important. There's an emerging field called epigenetics, which focuses on how genes are expressed rather than the genes themselves. Studies have shown that diet and lifestyle are highly influential to our gene expression. A great example of this is the Pima Indians of Arizona and Mexico. They are two genetically identical tribes. The Pimas living in Mexico have maintained the same diet and lifestyle for hundreds of years. Diabetes and obesity are almost non-existent. The Pimas living in Arizona tell a different story. In the past 50 years, they have adopted the Western diet and now have the highest incidence of diabetes among any tribe in the whole world. Obesity in the American Indian and Alaska Native has tripled over the last 3 decades. Obesity carries serious long-term health consequences and is a contributing factor to many chronic illnesses such as diabetes mellitus among the Native North Americans. Nearly all of the area in the United States that has been classified as desert is found in the empty interior or the southwest borderland. Irrigated crops dominate agricultural production in the empty interior. Without irrigation, a stable agricultural economy would be impossible in this dry region. Today, Arizona depends on subsurface waters to supply several times as much water as the Hia Salt River system. The pressures on the deficient water supply are growing more acute throughout the drier southern half of the empty interior. While a person's access to quality health care is relevant to good health, it is not the only determinant. Although a range of social, economic, and environmental influences contribute to the overall health of the community, the fundamental change in access to water has been a large determinant in the nutrition of these people. Residents of the Gila River Indian Reservation in southern Arizona have a 60% diabetic population. A sad recognition is that many of these inequities, such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, can be prevented. Until the late 19th and 20th century, the O'Odham and Pima Nation communities lived in an abundant agricultural lifestyle. With the introduction of damming of major water sources and population increase, one of the thriving plots have become formidable desert. The absence of accessible fresh fruits and vegetables has caused a drastic increase of obesity and diabetes among the natives due to change in diet. The determinants of diabetes in the Pima and O'Odham Indians are recognized as the highest prevalence incidence, risk factors, and pathogenesis of the North American populations. Though the Native Americans were adapt to the desert environment in its natural setting, the introduction of settlements and diversion of water supply has gradually created a natural phenomenon of drought. Systematic studies show the diet change has encouraged the increase of obesity, to which encourages the acquisition of diabetes. Reports of the Tohono Nation, more than 60% adults and 76% of puberty-age children are diagnosed as obese or with diabetes. Even though the rate of diabetes is on the increase, it does vary throughout different indigenous populations. Each group must be addressed separately according to identifiable social and environmental determinants. The loss of the wetlands and riparian habitats reduced access to nutritious foods, which were the traditional diet of the American native. Rich in fiber and natural herbs, these diets would actually be considered a gold standard in the United States Food and Drug Administration today. Consisting of lean meats, protein, fruits and vegetables, low in fat, and no refined sugar or salt, purchased today would be enormous in cost. When they go to the store, they must buy it affordable to feed as many people to quell hunger. The Battle of the Apache and O'odham people ended many years ago. The Pima Indians have continued to be a peaceful population. Although things have changed throughout the centuries, the ancient ways of hunting and sharing foods are a continued way of life. Without the large-scale irrigation previously supplied by the Gila River, the farming and hunting has disappeared. A report published in Psychology Today notes the ability of the earlier 20th century natives to hunt, fish, and grow necessary staples. Although the Arizona natives are facing disparities in their area of diet, there are many other Native American communities which have been introduced to new challenges of diabetes and obesity. By involving students from underrepresented populations, Enduring Legacies Native Cases Initiative has begun to initiate native wild foods, including tepiary beans, cholla buds, and sagora fruit. All of these foods formerly grew by the Gila River. During harvesting, tribal culture and nutritional information were shared, and was imperative for new initiatives to address the gap between diabetic education and available diet. With the depletion of irrigation, the traditional farms have disappeared. Along with the devastation of health, the complications of diabetes affect the physical, social, and financial well-being of the community. Medicinal plants such as the prickly pear are a thing of the past. The Indian people have a relationship to the land, which has also always been closely intertwined with culture, giving them a sense of comfort and health. Therefore, the health of the land greatly influences the health of the community. Each variety of fruit and beans uses its own technique and tools. Natives learn from elders and community members how to pick and process the foods, as well as the cultural importance, nutritional qualities, and other information which helps to sustain a healthy nation. Not only were the natives disposed to a completely altered diet, they were introduced to commodity food, which does not assist in the struggle with obesity. Traditional crops in the summer include white and brown tepiary beans, squash, yellow-meated watermelon, cowpea, corn, and devil's claw for basket weaving. Wild foods are used to produce healthy bread of the past. Hopefully, these efforts will continue to encourage a healthier lifestyle and diet in the Native Americans. I don't think that should have been it. Harvesting and processing the food in the traditional manner helps to generate the activity necessary to stay healthy. Fry bread is the Western bread and is made up from a deep-fried mixture of flour and lard and eaten with various toppings such as jam or cheese. As the ancient tribes pound the flour into flat shells, it's a very unnutritional example of food that can be made from the government rations and is now common for the Native Americans. The influences of colonization have caused a historical trauma for the North Americans, causing a lack of cultural identity and feelings of inequality and oppression. These injustices contribute to the current inequalities and social conditions that influence the overall health status of these people. According to the CDC, diabetes is a chronic, progressive, but preventable disease in most cases. Obesity interacts with diabetes as an age-adjusted risk factor. There is also a higher incidence of diabetes in obese children with at least one parent who is obese. Since the early 1960s, diabetes and obesity have become chronic illnesses among tribal members. Over 3/4 of adults are diagnosed with these diseases. Federal medical programs fail to provide solutions within this population, so tribal members have turned to traditional foods and games to control obesity, which often leads to diabetes. The risk of developing diabetes is higher in siblings born after the mom has developed diabetes than for those who were born before the mom developed the disease. Study is done to examine the role of intrauterine diabetic environment in addition to genetic transmission of susceptibility. This may help to explain why diabetes is so rapid growing in Pimas, not just environmental and genetic predisposition, but this exposure to diabetes in utero compounds the excessive risk. Risk factors include genetic and environmental factors, changing lifestyles, change in physical activity and diet. Strategies need to be enforced to prevent and treat. Lessons and education about healthy foods and eating and physical activity must be introduced back into the nations. Early medicine has always attributed diabetes to a family gene. As the native population was forced to adopt the Western diet, the continuing level of health contributes to obesity and many times diabetes. According to historians, the original Pima and O'Odham diets consisted of approximately 15% of fat in comparison to the current fat intake of 40% average. Although diabetes is a preventable disease, there is a basic intervention and maintenance step which must be implemented in order to stay healthy. The prospective incorporation of a diabetic program into the North American and Alaska Native diets involves a major overhaul of public health services. By first addressing each tribal community for the social determinants of health, such as the lack of healthy foods, the ability for change will enhance programs and build healthier nations. Even though genetic and environmental factors contribute to the high incidence of diabetes in the Pima Indians, many of the same risk factors appear in other racial groups. Environmental factors such as diet, physical activity, and depression contribute to mechanisms leading to the inadequacy of insulin secretion. To our modern eyes, the desert may look like a lifeless and barren landscape, but to the eyes of the Native American, it looked like a cornucopia of valuable plants. Plants served not just for food, they provided much of the fabric of the society. They were used for medicine, home construction, cooking, storage containers, clothing, furniture, hunting, recreation, and fuel. They figured prominently in mythology, religion, and ritual. For most of their prehistoric past, the desert Indians were strictly hunters and gatherers. They did not even begin practicing agriculture until about 4,000 years ago, and even then they continued primarily as hunters and gatherers for at least another 2,000 years. They relied heavily on their keen knowledge of natural local resources, especially the plants, to feed, clothe, and shelter their families. They located campsites and hamlets and timed their seasonal moves specifically to capitalize the ability of key economic plants, which were foundation for their survival. Research by Brown reveals the possibility that the agricultural population of the community can return to health if their agricultural diet can be reproduced. The participation rates of Native Americans are difficult due to the lack of better represented social and behavioral education. Although the children have access to community schools, the levels of outside introduction of farming assistance impedes a sense of validation to learn new methods of healthy living. By combining ambitious, comprehensive strategies with a continuing promise of a change is a part of the Hia River Community Schools' drive for health. By assuring the children are learning healthy habits and new growing procedures, such as greenhouses, the future generation of Native Americans in the Gila River community will continue to exist. Today, there are two farms which use different irrigation systems. One is more of a production where the groundwater is pumped in, and the other is a traditional and is irrigated only with rainwater. The situation that makes sustenance difficult is the lack of rainwater in the desert. After struggling for 80 years, in 2004, the Arizona Water Settlement Act entitled the community to up to 311,800 acre-feet of water per year. Water is the key to restoration of a self-sufficient agricultural economy in the community. Since 1996, the Pima O'Odham Community Action Group has worked to create a healthy and sustainable community. Beginning as a backyard garden with a basket weaving class, the group now sponsors 2 farms, a native cafe, and an art gallery. The Pima were strong runners, basket weavers, and farmers who could make the desert bloom. They served as trusted scouts for the U.S. Cavalry and continue to serve their country today in various forms of the armed forces. The Pima were well known for their basket weaving techniques, intricately woven. They were also watertight. The Maricopa Indians, known for their red clay pottery, created famous jars and bowls. Each culture used weaving materials native to their region and forms and weaving techniques that have been passed down through untold generations. For example, in Arizona, both the Apache and Pima wove baskets out of split and sized willow shoots and split devil's claw seed pod. However, the finest Apache baskets were woven with 3-rod foundation, which made for a rigid basket. The Pima wove on a grass bundle of foundation, which yielded a flatter coil and slightly flexible basket. The traditional basketry forms of the Pima include a tall vase-shaped grain storage and a shallow, deep tray or bowl. The shallow trays, which can run from under 6 inches to diameter over 20 inches, feature geometric motifs. While some of these cultures continue to weave today, very few are made using the same technology as the ancestors. For example, the Apache continued to weave twined burden baskets after the 1930s, but relatively few of the 3-rod foundation. The Pima in recent years have focused on horsehair miniature baskets for the most part. After the 1930s, the Pima O'Odham could continue to weave yucca while giving up the weaving in willow. Yucca baskets could be woven quickly, sold at a modest price, and curio market and still yield a profit to the weaver. Revival of willow basketry and 3-rod foundation basketry takes place from time to time with various degrees of success. However, the majority of collectors still express a preference for historic era. Inequity and inequality are associates in the determinancies of life expectancy and quality of life. Health disparities may be caused by genetics, but associated by outside socioeconomic challenges. The Gila River people are a substance of this chronic affliction of disease. Not only does the increase of illness expose the natives as a whole to adverse stress and experiences, the energy stores of the physical body suffer in protective responses. As these health disparities continue, the effect reaches to the next generation. Topiary beets had essentially stopped being grown by the O'Odham farmers, and with the introduction of the community gardens, these traditional foods are becoming more common again. With the help of the O'Odham Youth Project and Pima and O'Odham Community Action Group, traditional foods are now being offered in the schools. The mission is to empower the O'Odham and Pima youth to learn the traditional methods of the farming while creating community spaces for revitalizing healthy foods. The new generation of American Indian farmers is becoming a culturally, environmentally, and economically viable way of life. Research reveals the possibility that the agricultural population of the community can return to health if their agricultural diet can be reproduced. The partition rates of Native Americans are difficult due to the lack of better represented groups. By promoting education and awareness of the dangers of obesity and poor diet, the tribal communities can gain better understanding of the social, physical, economical, and physical determinants of diabetes in their communities. The communities with the tradition of farming could create new practices such as community greenhouses and mentorship programs to teach the traditional subsistence practices of the Indians. By rallying support from people of all ages, there are important benefits for the community which must be developed and introduced. In search for an activity that will be advantageous for introducing the issues of the Pima and O'Odham nations, it has been chosen to use the introduction of the Facebook and Project O'Odham and Odig Generation websites to communicate with residents of the Hia River area in debilitating disease of diabetes. For introduction to medical, public, and health services, informational brochures. The conceptual consideration of the social determinants paradigm is an important step in contribution and change of the fundamental preventions of obesity and diabetes around the Hia River Nation people. With the introduction of environmental deprivation of the community to public health professionals, educators, and community services, the paradigm of restrictive growing methods can be diminished and the ability for the traditional food consumption introduced.